Think about it. This is the one you've spent your whole life with, the one who's privy to all your deepest secrets. You find yourself entangled in a complex network of medical devices all of a sudden, avoiding dealing with your anxieties, pleasures, and eccentricities. Your once indestructible heart is now crumbling. The laughter that used to fill your home has been replaced by the constant beeping of monitors. No, this wasn't a script for a daytime drama. Kelly Ripa had to face this terrifying truth. The abrupt transfer of her husband, Mark Consuelos, to the intensive care unit brought her entire world crashing down. Kelly, whose singing always puts a smile on our faces, went on to detail the terrifying anxiety she felt at that moment. She remembered the antiseptic white corridors, the hum of the sirens, and the hasty murmured prayers as she followed the gurney. What was occurring was beyond her comprehension. In an instant, their conversations shifted from dinner plans to her worst nightmares about him leaving. What happened next, though, shook onlookers to their core. Mark was adamant on seeing their children despite his communication issues. It was an unusual request. In the face of uncertainty, it was a father's desperate appeal. He preferred to have a private conversation with them about his feelings than to bring up his illness. Before the opportunity passed, he had to say what was important. A single request was made once he realized he was on the verge of death. The awkward and hurried manner in which this request was presented saddened Kelly. It ripped her to shreds. Honoring his wish would have meant protecting their children from the terrifying realities of the intensive care unit. But she had to make a tough choice. Expose them to a world they weren't ready for or break his want. To love, she swore. Nervousness permeated the atmosphere as the kids showed up. With all his might, Mark spoke to the kids one by one. As Kelly watched, he spoke to his 3 children in a whisper, encouraging them to be brave and responsible, to be generous and persistent, and to carry on a spirit of laughter and joy with their youngest. The mental strain became to be too much. Kelly saw her husband getting ready to abandon the family as she watched. The special combination of love and sadness in his eyes was still palpable to her. The appearance of someone about to fade away. Seeing her dearest friend show signs of being okay with letting go was a worst-case scenario. The next moment was so devastating that it almost broke her. In a low voice, Mark pleaded with Kelly, saying, "If I can't tell them tomorrow, promise me you'll keep telling them how much I love them." The children then left the room. The thought of that dying wish, that request, sank Kelly's heart. In the midst of everything that appeared lost, it was also the driving force behind her determination to remain by his side. During the lengthy, silent hours in the waiting room, Kelly held on to her beliefs, her cherished memories, and the idea of all the experiences they still had yet to share. The bright lights of the intensive care unit brought her an epiphany. Problems like this affect every household. Right now, when our words matter the most, love and fear clash. However, events changed. As is characteristic of a Consuelos, Mark's intransigence started to emerge. As time went on, doctors started to notice subtle changes. He felt a diminution of his respiratory distress. His cheeks flushed again. He cracked a smile once more. When Mark finally learned to breathe independently, away from the machine's continual hiss, it was a huge victory. Kelly was captivated by the rhythmic movement of his chest and tightly grasped his hand. She cried as she gushed over the most exquisite sound she had ever heard. Not long after that, he started talking again. A gentle murmur replaced the frigid stillness. At last, he could do more than just nod. A query, some sound advice, or even a small laugh could come from him. When Kelly heard him laugh, she thought he was really returning to them, she claimed. It was physically demanding to battle. The thought of being thus exposed shocked Mark, a guy renowned for his strength. Sitting up and standing up seemed like climbing a mountain when he finally did it. Family and friends crowded into the hospital corridor to cheer on his set of walker steps as he raced to the finish line. Kelly could see his determination. Along with this man, she had created a life. Farewell wasn't in his plans. He was retaliating. A life lived with courage, resilience, and joy were his guiding principles. He wasn't content to only pass these principles on to his offspring either. Living them was his life. Emotions ran high on the day he was released. Coming out of the intensive care unit, ICU, the place of all their anxieties, was like emerging from a tunnel. As Kelly brought Mark out of the hospital, she would always remember the simple but deep gift of her son's warmth on his face. As we made our way home, a sense of quiet appreciation permeated the air. Everything outdoors looked brighter, as if the hues were amplified. The conflict had not yet ended when they returned home. Everything was back to normal now. It took weeks of rest and treatment to recover. However, things were distinct on this occasion. Suddenly, their hectic public lives appeared insignificant. What really counted were the peaceful moments. Home entertainment, whether it's a movie, coffee on the porch, or quality time with loved ones, is unparalleled. Kelly felt compelled to tell their tale after experiencing this profound change in viewpoint. It encompassed more than only their immediate relatives. In television, every detail is prearranged. There is no script for life's most monumental occurrences. All the glamour and splendor disappeared the second they were put to the test. There remained only the essential reality. No one can steady you quite like family. And love, above all else, is paramount. Even after getting home, it wasn't over. There was about to be a shift to a lot more subtle and intricate conflict. A deep, fragile exhaustion lingered after the frenetic intensity of the trauma faded. Mark, who used to have a busy lifestyle, was suddenly a bystander in his own life as he underwent treatment. The utter silence of their home was almost unbearable. For weeks, all they could hear was the constant beeping of monitors. Even a refrigerator's usual hum sounded strange and audible now. It felt like a huge understatement to say this was the new normal. Recuperation was not an easy journey. Physically, Mark suffered from his body's betrayal of his will and his fight to restore strength. Her hypervigilance was the unseen cost to Kelly, the unease that crept into her belly every time Mark slept for too long. Her years of being a wife were abruptly cut short when she became a full-time caregiver, a position that demanded the running the distance of a marathon. Everyone, even the little ones, were learning new terrain. They learned the hard way that their father was mortal, and that realization aged them quickly. Now it was the unstoppable father who needed assistance. But the principles he had taught were deeply embedded in that vulnerability. Bravery is more than simply not being afraid. They seen it directly. To put it simply, it's the struggle for survival. Everyone in the family would probably keep quiet in the face of such a disaster. On the other hand, Kelly and Mark's life were completely open to the public. A daily dosage of energetic positivity was Kelly's aim. Once again, she's beaming for the world to see. But this time around, everything was different. All of it, the food segments, the chit-chat, the celebrity rumors, felt so insignificant. In the grand scheme of things, Mark's subsequent appointment as Kelly's permanent co-host on Live with Kelly and Mark only served to heighten the impact. What had been her personal performance space became a public display of their union as they transformed the stage. There was more significance to their natural connection and on-air chemistry. The audience got to see more than just the two famous people when they discussed their lengthy marriage. They had two survivors under surveillance. It wasn't an easy decision to tell the tale. They chose to reveal the raw truth of their experience by destroying their manicured public personas. By detailing their ordeal, Kelly was paying homage to the realization she received while waiting for treatment at the hospital. This happens to everyone. Doing so was an invaluable gift she bestowed upon her audience, as it confirmed what every person who has ever negotiated with the cosmos in a waiting room fears. All of their previous experiences were reframed after this. In favor of living in the now, we forsook our 5-year plans and professional aspirations. No longer could we afford to skip family dinners. The "I love you" that used to end every discussion has transformed into a statement. After settling into their public personas, the pair fiercely guarded their privacy. They were determined to make the most of their second opportunity. Disorientingly, their everyday lives were suddenly full of chaos and energy, in stark contrast to the clinical stillness of the hospital. But that was the spark they needed to begin the healing process. As time passed, the new normal that Kelly had mentioned started to solidify. One that focused less on going back to their old selves and more on finding out who they had become. The process of physical recuperation was extremely taxing. A man whose sense of self had always been bound up with his athleticism and physical prowess, Mark now found himself engaged in conflicts that had before appeared insignificant. Big wins came when seemingly little things, like buttoning a blouse or holding a coffee cup steady, became second nature. There were days of deep annoyance, when the obstinacy that Kelly so frequently made fun of threatened to boil over into resentment. Their marriage, however, discovered a new, deeper rhythm in these unfiltered moments. Despite her roles as wife and upbeat co-host, Kelly had more going on. He found stability in her. Patience was a silent power that took in his wrath and returned nothing but love. But when they were back in the spotlight, the real test began. There was a lot of unsaid anticipation on the live with Kelly and Mark set on the first day back. The crowd, used to the comfortable chemistry and humorous banter, appeared to be holding its breath. The producers had planned a low-key performance. The reality of their experience would not be sanitized, even with light news, easy guests, and no serious segments. The subject of summer travel typically brings out complaints about misplaced bags or delayed flights, but Mark stumbled halfway through a piece on the subject. While reminiscing about a previous journey, the crushing reality that he nearly didn't have a future trip to look forward to seized his throat. A hush descended across the studio. Kelly may have used a joke to defuse the situation in the previous interaction. She just reached out and placed her palm on top of his on the desk. Instead, this was not a stage production. A lifeline, in fact. With a crack in his voice, Mark revealed that we nearly didn't return here, revealing the underlying vulnerability of the morning show presenter. The studio is not my intended target.